Hi, this is Stevie. This is a photo that I took while on a trip in California along Highway 49 in the Gold Country. And I wanted to show you how you can take a photo like this and transform it and make it your own. Make it make it the way that you would like it to look. And so I have a sketch here, and you can see that I've simplified it a lot. And you don't need to add every little detail to get your point across. I only drew a little bit of the house, but I think it's effective for this. There was the big rose bush in the front and the flag, of course, which I think is the center of attention. And that's what I wanted to call attention to. So here I'm just getting in some sky color using cobalt blue and probably more water than I should have on this little sketchbook. I don't think this paper was meant to hold that much water because I got a lot of blossoms, but actually once I finished the sky I kind of liked that look and just left it. So just getting in that sky around the White House so that the house shows up, and the rose bushes, and then the right side there around the flag. And you can see all of the things that I chose to leave out. This is all that I wanted in there. It was all I needed to tell my story. So I've gotten all of the sky color in, and I want to add some shadow. Before I start on the flag, I want to add some shadow to the eave of that White House. There I'm just doing a little correcting of the sky. But that white eave, I want to get a shadow under it. And for a shadow color, I like to use a mix of manganese blue, which is like cerulean, and a little bit of permanent rose. And then I add just a touch of green to that to gray it down a bit. And that makes a nice shadow color. So I'll get that right under the eave and on the porch as well. The house that's on the porch, or the part of the house that's on the porch, is in shadow. So I just wanted to indicate that as well. And I'll have to go back and strengthen that color a little bit. It's already starting to lighten up quite a bit. I just want to make sure I get those shadows dark enough. I'm just fiddling there. I don't know what I'm doing really. Cleaning up color, I guess. And I have a 1/4" Princeton brush, that flat brush. And I like it because I can do really quick cleanups with it. I was trying to clean up that flagpole a bit. I had gotten some blue on it, and that 1/4" flat works well for that. Now I'm going back in, reinforcing those shadows again, just to darken up that color a bit. And now I want to move on to the star of my painting, and that's the flag. And so I'm going to move to a smaller brush, my number 1. That's a Princeton Velvet Touch. I use quite a few of those brushes. I like them. But the number 1 is great for getting in these small spaces when you look at those tiny lines on the flag. And I wanted a really nice bright red color, so I'm using Anthraquinoid Red. And that is by Daniel Smith, I think. And getting the stripes in there. I was using a flag in our front yard as a reference here when I was painting it. Today is Independence Day, so the Boy Scouts had planted a flag right in our front yard. So just working on the stripes. And before you paint stripes like this, just go over it mentally so that you know that you're going to end up with the red and the white where you want them. And I like to use ultramarine blue. This is French ultramarine for the blue part of the flag. That's a really nice color, and I think it looks really nice up against the red and white. And then I wanted to color the flagpole just so that it stands out more. And I'm using raw sienna, which is more of a transparent color. And it looks a little bit like gold. That's why I chose that color. So there we have it. The flag was pretty easy to do. I did forget one thing, and that is the stars on the flag. And I'll show you at the very end of the painting how I did that. I used, well, I didn't demonstrate it here, but I used a white Posca pen fine point to make the stars on the flag. And you'll see it in the final photo. So now I want to skip around and be sure to work on areas that are not wet. And I wanted to get some light into the front of that house. And all I did was I took a little bit of my permanent yellow deep, which is almost like an orange color, a yellow orange, and used a lot of water with it to just kind of dab a little bit on, just to give some interest to the front of that house. And now I want to move on to those rose bushes. And the rose bushes in the photo that you can see are just, it's a lot of green and with white roses and not that attractive. So I wanted to make it the way that I would like it to look. So I'm going to add more color to it. Right now I'm mixing up something for the dark green color, the base of it. And I'm using Windsor blue, which is like a phthalo blue, or I'm sorry, a Prussian blue, and my green gold. And green gold is a nice transparent yellow-green color, and it works really nice for something like this. When I mix the two colors together and I added a little bit of red to dull it down, it gives you a nice green color. But notice that I didn't mix those two colors together, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So now I picked up a little bit of alizarin crimson, and you don't see that on my palette. It's on a small palette on the side. And I don't use alizarin crimson often, but here I didn't want something as bright as permanent rose. That's too much. So the alizarin crimson is a little more dull. So I've painted the roses first by dabbing them on, as you watched me do, and then I added water to it. And this is kind of a balancing act because I have to let the paper dry a little bit, but not too much, before I add the green color to the bottom of those bushes. But if there's too much color on too much water on the paper, that color, that green, is going to bleed right up into the red. I like it to bleed a little bit, but not too much. So see what a nice color that makes for the foliage? I'm not a big fan of sap green, but I like it more to the blue side, which this color does nicely. And I don't know if you watched when I picked up the color, but I would put my brush into the blue and then go pick up a little green. So I didn't mix them right on the palette. And that's what gives that nice variation in color on the paper. There I'm just adding a little more of the pink color, the rose color, and some of the foliage color. They were peeking through the fence, so I just wanted to indicate that between a few of the slats on the fence. And it gives a lot of interest to the sketch too. May have to go in and darken that a bit, I don't know yet. It tends to lighten up so much as it dries. So always check your color after it's dried to make sure it's pretty even and that you don't have areas that you'd like to add more color to. And I have to move around a little bit on this big bush because I don't want to run into that wet color. So I'm going up to the top and adding some roses there, some rose color. And I purposely I make it look like there's lots of roses and very little foliage. And I did that purposely because I just don't like all of that green at the front of the painting. And I think this adds more interest. The other thing I did is I added a little bright light to the roses. See how I dropped in a little bit of that permanent yellow deep. Just a few drops to give a nice light highlight to them at the tops. Now adding more of the foliage color. Darkening it up enough so that it won't be too light when it dries. And I'll have to go back and adjust this back and forth because I can already see that my foliage in the front has more color in it than the foliage in the back, and if I want to even that out, I'll have to go back and do that later after it all dries. Here again, adding some of the alizarin crimson color for this next group of foliage or roses. Notice how I work in layers to do this, and the lines that I drew are good separation points for this. You just have to remember to not get too close to the colors next to it, or they'll all mix together. And there I have to be careful not to get into that pink below it, but I think it's dry enough that it won't do that now. This is something I would recommend that you practice on a piece of scratch paper before you try this on a good sketch or a good piece of paper. Now the rest of that rose bush I think I'm going to handle in just one big shape, just for the sake of time. Same process. Start with the alizarin crimson. I did add touches of the permanent yellow deep into it at the top to indicate a highlight. And work fast so that your roses don't look too dotty, because when you lay the dots down, if you let it dry, it's just going to stay that way. So I try to work fast and use enough water to avoid that. Now going in with the foliage color again. I just think that this color adds so much more interest than that big green bush that's in the photo. Oh, one more to do on the front here. Same process. There is an artist named Joyce Hicks that I took a workshop from several years ago, and she's a wonderful artist, and unfortunately she no longer teaches, but one thing she said that really stuck with me is paint things how you want them to be, not how they are. And I always try to remember that in my sketches. And here's an example of that. This is how I would really like it to look if I could change it. And there's more foliage coming through the fence, just indicating that. And notice there's some grasses that I drew right along the fence line at the bottom. That's really to just create some interest at the bottom. Although there is something at the bottom of that fence, I can't really tell what it is. So I'm getting that in with my green gold, and then I added a little bit of the darker color just to settle it down on the paper. And the one bush that's more distant under the flag, I didn't want that to be as bright, so I laid in some raw sienna and then added my foliage color below that. So it's a little further back. It would not be as bright, and I didn't want to call attention to it really. I want the attention on the flag back there. There, I'm just adding the foliage into that. And I once tried drawing this sketch using more of the house, and I didn't like it at all. It just got too busy, and that's why I decided to do it this way. And I also like the diagonal lines in this sketch, and in the photo as well. That creates a lot of interest. Just cleaning up a bit there before I move on. I'm mixing up a gray color with ultramarine blue and a little bit of my quinacridone burnt orange, which is like burnt sienna. Very light. I added a lot of water to it just to indicate a sidewalk. And note how I didn't spend much time at it and didn't put down a lot of color. I don't want to draw a lot of attention to it. The other thing I should mention is I changed the direction of the sun in this sketch, because the way that it looks in the photo, the house is all in shadow, and I didn't want that. And so I just changed my sketch to show that the light is coming from the upper right. And so I indicated some shadows on the left side of that fence. I don't know if you can see it where it turns the corner. I didn't spend much time on that, but I wanted the front part of the fence to be in the light. And I'm going to go in and shade that fence and show you how I did the other side of that fence. Now, I took I didn't want to draw all those separate slats in the fence that you see. So you can see what I did. It was all white, and I just drew lines indicating a fence. I didn't spend a lot of time at it. So in order to make it more interesting, I'm using my liner brush there on that front to indicate a shadow side of each post on the fence. And then on the side I'm working on right now, on that left side, that would be all in shadow if the light is coming from the upper right. So I just toned that down with some of my shadow color. And I used that same color to make the curb on the street and just indicate a little bit of the street. I didn't want to spend too much time there because who's going to look at it really? And there I'm just cleaning up the shadows that I put on with my liner brush. And there you have it, my little flag sketch, a good sketch for Independence Day. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and think about subscribing. And at the very end, I'm going to show you the finished piece where I added the stars to the flag with my Posca pen. And here it is, and you'll see that in a second here. But it made nice clean little dots because Posca pens are acrylic ink, and so it's opaque as well. So there's my little sketch. Thanks again for watching.